Hey y'all, I'm Lauren and welcome to Cantina Cast. Today I am talking about Shadows of Starlight issues 1 through 4. These were some of the first comics that were published as part of the High Republic Phase 3, and these are all written by Charles Soule. Something to really keep in mind about this series is that if you're planning on reading the High Republic adult novels, most specifically Eye of Darkness, written by George Mann, then you're going to want to read these comics first, or at least the first issue of this 4-issue run first. There's so much just overlap between these two stories that I feel like with phase 3 of the High Republic, I'm expecting that the comics are going to be like, if you're not reading it, you're going to be confused. And the reason I say that is because I was confused when I first tried reading Eye of Darkness before I read this comic series. I felt like there were things that had not been explained that needed to be explained. And the reason for that is because they were explained in this comic. So don't do what I did. Read them how you're supposed to read them. At least read issue 1 of this series before you read Eye of Darkness. If you at least do that, then you'll be fine. Because I think Eye of Darkness came out before issue 2 did, if I remember correctly. Or at least I read it before I read issue 2, and I was fine. So just as long as you're reading issue 1, then you're going to be good. But that is something that's been kind of cool about the High Republic, is that you're getting stories that are kind of going in lots of different directions, that it's just like a big puzzle that you're putting together. So, for better or worse, that's what you got to do with this series. And this series also did feel a little bit different to me than some of the other High Republic comics that I've read. And the main reason for that is because what this series is doing is they're all of the issues are pretty much covering around the same period of time, but each issue is following different characters during that period. So the main goal of this series is that they're trying to explain sort of where everybody's at in between the fall of Starlight Beacon and then where we pick up with Eye of Darkness. And I feel like it accomplishes that really well. But just keep in mind, it does kind of jump around between characters. Something else about this comic series to keep in mind too is that the short story collection Tales of Light and Life that was recently published a couple months back, that is also going to be an important read. There are some things, well, mainly one key particular event that I'm thinking of that this comic touches on that are explained more in Tales of Light and Life. I'm talking about the fate of Buryaga, which I'm not going to say what exactly that fate is before I start talking spoilers, but that's the thing that if you want to know like how exactly that went, how exactly we find out what happened to him, all of that, then you're going to want to pick up that short story collection because the comic mentions it, but it doesn't explain it fully. So yeah, so there's your what you need to read out of the way first. But overall, I really enjoyed this series. I feel like it kind of filled me in on where everybody's at, especially because it feels like there's been so much time in between phase 1 and phase 3, because with phase 2, of course, since we jumped back in time, like I feel like all of those phase 1 reads were so long ago. And I've read a lot of things since then, so it's nice that this comic is deliberately kind of giving us a little bit of a refresher of what happened during that time. Something else it does too is because it's giving you a little bit of a refresher, you kind of remember where we left off with people. So if you don't feel like going back and rereading everything, then I feel like this comic does kind of save you a little bit of time. And of course, as far as the writing goes, Charles Soule like never disappoints in my book. So I mean, I'm super happy with the way that the storytelling went, even though it's a little bit different than the way that the storytelling in the High Republic comics has been so far, since we're kind of jumping around between characters and we're just covering one sort of year. And each comic is kind of fast forwarding several months at a time each time. Even though that format's a little bit different, I feel like it worked for what the purpose of this series is trying to do, which is just filling us in, giving us the need to know, like, here's what happened, here's where we left off. So I feel like it accomplished what it set out to do. Also, Albert and I did cover this series on the Cantina Cast live show a few weeks back. So far, we've covered issues 1 and 2, and we're planning to get to all of them at some point. But if you want to listen to a more detailed breakdown, I mean, if you really want to hear us getting into the weeds on it for like over an hour, then check out that video. Okay, so now I am going to start talking about individual issues. And in this video, I'm also going to talk probably about some Eye of Darkness spoilers. I'm going to try to not be too overt with the Eye of Darkness spoilers just in case anyone hasn't read it yet. But just beware, like if you haven't read Eye of Darkness yet, this might be a little bit of a dangerous video if you don't want any spoilers, because these stories are just so interconnected. It's really hard to like completely avoid hinting at anything at all that could be considered a spoiler by some people. I say that because I am that person that I'm very sensitive about spoilers. I always am like super strict about wanting no spoilers. So if you're like me, keep that in mind if you're watching this video before you've read that book. So, if you don't want Eye of Darkness spoilers, if you don't want any Shadows of Starlight spoilers for any of the issues that you haven't gotten to yet, now is your time to turn back. So, opening up with issue 1, which is called The Guardian Protocols. This issue is starting with the fall of Starlight Beacon. There's a comms that goes out that everybody receives that just tells all the Jedi, no matter where they are, Starlight Beacon has fallen. This is an emergency. You got to go back to Coruscant. We need to regroup. We need to figure out what we're going to do next. And during this time, Yoda is reflecting on how the Jedi need to regroup, figure out their next steps, but he also feels like that they need to look to the secrets of the past. So he's going to go research and meditate. So once again, Yoda's going off to go do something. We don't know what yet, but thankfully it's not too long until we find out. Then this is when we fast forward a week. So then we see that all of the Jedi are in the Senate. Lina So has allowed the Jedi to use the Senate chambers to gather as many Jedi as they can to hear this meeting. And they're talking about how they're introducing the Guardian protocols again. And we get the sense that this is not the first time that they've implemented these. These have been around for a while, but they're just not used often. And basically what these are is it's kind of like a different set of rules for wartime. A key example that really stands out as part of the Guardian protocols is accelerated instruction for Padawans. So they're trying to get Padawans through the training. They're trying to promote them as quickly as they can, which is very familiar from the prequels, so we know that that's probably not going to turn out great. But the reaction to the Guardian protocols is a little bit mixed. There's, we see some Jedi that are like, I'm a scholar, I'm not a soldier, I don't want to do this. We see some Padawans that are like, are we even ready for this? Like, I don't think we are. So this is really making everybody on edge that these are being implemented. Whether people support it or not, it's kind of just like, oh gosh, it's getting real now. And the Guardian protocols are supposed to be rescinded when the time is right. They're not supposed to be a forever thing. But I am kind of wondering if we're going to see these, or at least some of these, just become permanent. Because, of course, by the time the prequels roll around, the way that the Guardian protocols sound is it's pretty much just a way of life by that point. A big example of that is there's a part in this issue where they're talking about making simpler lightsabers that are meant for more of wartime rather than the ceremonial ones that we saw in phase 1. And when they're showing these simple lightsabers that are just meant to kind of be like purely functional, it's literally a prequel lightsaber. Like that is what they're holding up in the image. So that was kind of my signal that, okay, these are going to stick around probably. Then we fast forward again to 3 months after the fall of Starlight Beacon, and Yoda actually comes back. And he comes back with Aslan Rel. And if you read the Edge of Balance Precedent, which is the manga from phase 2, you'll probably remember Aslan Rel. He was also mentioned in Path of Vengeance as well, but we get a lot more information about his story and kind of what he's going through in the manga. So if you haven't read that yet, I do recommend it because it explains a lot about why Aslan Rel is the way that he is. And also it was one of my favorite reads from phase 2. It was just like a great story even on its own. Or if you don't feel like reading it, I do have a video about it, which I can link as well. But in a nutshell, Aslan Rel is a dark side user. He was a Jedi during phase 2, but he had an encounter with the Nameless that really messed him up psychologically, which is an understatement. And I mean, he even had to go like live in a facility for a while because he couldn't function. It was so severe. And as a result of his encounter with the Nameless, he ended up leaving the Jedi Order at some point, and now he's just a dark side user. And he feels like this was a sacrifice that he had to make to be able to deal with the effects that the Nameless had on him. So even though he's a dark side user, he's not a Sith, and he is willing to help the Jedi in their fight against the Nameless because to Aslan Rel, like just completely eradicating the Nameless is the most important thing. So he's willing to work with Yoda, even though they see things differently. When he brings Aslan Rel in, we see that everybody can feel that Aslan Rel is like very dark side energy. He is not well received. They kind of want him to leave. People even pull their lightsabers at one point. Like it's not going well. It's getting started off on a bad foot. But Yoda's sticking up for Aslan. He really believes that this is the best lead that the Jedi have right now. And he's like, if you think that you can't hold your own against an unarmed man, then we've got a bigger problem. So they all kind of put their lightsabers away and are like, okay, like they're going to try to see where Yoda's coming from on this. We fast forward again and we do see that Yoda is working with Aslan, but it's very challenging. And Aslan Rel is having really tough flashbacks. Sometimes he lashes out during the flashbacks, which is kind of dangerous, but Yoda's really trying to see it through. One of these flashbacks does help Aslan remember a key piece of the Nameless that he had forgotten just because so much time had passed. But something that happened many years ago was that he came across some information that the Lefbruck family knew where the planet of the Nameless was. And the way that they knew this is because they had a compass that would lead them to this planet. This is explained a lot more in phase 2 in the middle grade novel Quest for Planet X. So Aslan remembers where the compass is, and so him and Yoda are going to go find the compass, which will ultimately lead them to the planet of the Nameless. And so when Aslan and Yoda go to do this, they're on a ship, and Aslan ends up pretty much the decision that he makes for himself, he obviously does this without consulting Yoda, is that rather than finding the compass, what actually needs to happen is they need to destroy the compass and they need to destroy anybody who might have knowledge about the compass or the planet. So what Aslan does is when they get to the planet where the compass is supposedly located, he uses a sort of mind trick dark side. Well, obviously not Jedi mind trick because he's a dark side user, but that type of a thing where he causes one of the pilots of the ship to just crash into the planet and just destroy everything. So Aslan has killed a bunch of people. Yoda's appalled. He didn't expect Aslan to do something like this. And Aslan pretty much is like, yeah, well, that sucks that you don't support what I just did, but I had to do it. I didn't have a choice. It was more important that I destroyed anybody who might have this information. And what Aslan says to Yoda is pretty much you don't understand the Nameless like I do because of the encounter that I had with them, but that's okay because I'm willing to do things that you are not willing to do. So he's pretty much just doing the Jedi's dirty work for them. That line at the end of this issue, it did have me wondering if maybe he's right. Like I wonder if he is willing to do things like because he's willing to do things that the Jedi won't do. I wonder if ultimately they will benefit from his methods, even though they don't support them. And it'll be kind of one of those things where it's like, yeah, this is very anti Jedi, but they also don't really regret it because it was the only way. I don't know. That's just me kind of thinking ahead and theorizing, but I'm wondering if something like that is going to happen down the line. So then we have issue 2, A Resonance of Hope. This is starting at the same place that issue 1 starts at, but we're following a different storyline. So with this one, we're following Elzar Mann and Avar Kriss in the aftermath of the fall of Starlight Beacon. And right after Starlight falls, the two of them are really thinking about how they're missing Stellan. And it's, they're really having a hard time coping with the way that he died on Starlight. A key symbol of this is that we do see Elzar holding Stellan's lightsaber at several points throughout this issue. He kind of just looks like he always has it with him. They also talk about Bel Zettifar and how he's missing Burryaga and having a hard time coping with the fact that Burryaga is missing. Bel is refusing to admit that Burryaga is dead because he really believes that he's not. or at least is holding out hope that he's not. And it did kind of make me laugh a little bit because Elzar and Avar, they were at one point talking about like they're going to talk to the council about Belle's attachment because attachment is a problem. And I was like, y'all are like really wanting to talk. Like, I don't know. I felt a little defensive of Belle in that moment. I'm not going to lie. I was like, y'all were literally just talking about like, Elzar is carrying around Stellan's lightsaber everywhere he goes, and y'all are about to tell on Bell for hoping his friend isn't dead. Like, come on. So I just kind of thought that was funny. I mean, I love Elzar and Avar, but you know, they've got a little bit of a problem with double standards. But one thing that Avar is really, you know, struggling with is that she feels responsible for what happened on Starlight. She feels like it was all her fault. She feels like if she was there, then it wouldn't have happened. I do feel like she's being a little hard on herself because there was a lot against them at that point, but she does feel like if she hadn't have left to go chase Lorna D, then she feels like she might have been able to stop it. And when she's sharing this with Elzar, he does admit that he killed Chancey Yarrow on Starlight. So they're both just kind of trading their struggles right now. And this is also when Avar tells Elzar that she is not going to go to Coruscant. She's not going to heed the call of the Jedi to all return. She's going to do her own thing, which didn't go well last time, but I guess she's gonna try it again and see if it goes better this time. Elzar does disagree with her. He's like, you need to like listen to the call, like this is serious. And she lashes out at him. She just kind of goes off. And unfortunately, that is the last thing that she says to him for a while. So knowing that, it does kind of reveal a little bit of why these characters are in the place that they're at when we pick up with the novel Eye of Darkness. About a week after this conversation, that's when the storm wall goes up. What it is it is like pretty much a technological wonder where they have these beacons that are spaced out along space in the outer rim, and the Republic ships can't go past it. So it's literally a barrier that the Nihil have put up that the Jedi can't get to the other side of. So Avar, unfortunately, was trapped on the other side because she was out there when the storm wall went up. And so that's why her and Elzar are separated for quite some time unexpectedly. And when she gets trapped over there, we see a creepy message from Markion Ro that gets broadcast to everybody that's on that side of the storm wall. And he's pretty much just telling people, you're Nihil now. Welcome to freedom, which, of course, I mean, you know, it's Markion Ro saying that. And once the storm wall goes up, Elzar becomes obsessed with trying to get a hold of Avar. He's trying everything to try to get some communication through to the other side of the storm wall, and not really anything is working. And while Avar is stuck over there, time is passing, and she's really just doing the best that she can to help who she can. But unfortunately, the Nihil have really incentivized the people to report any Jedi that they see by threatening them. So it's kind of hard for Avar to really make much progress because the Nihil have really scared everybody, and she does have General Vice on her tail this whole time. General Vice was introduced in the Phase 2 comic, The Blade, which I have a video about The Blade, and I also covered The Blade with Albert a few weeks ago too, where we got into it in a little bit more detail. But pretty much what you need to know about General Vice in this specific comic is that she is ruthless. She hates Jedi and always has. And even before the Nihil existed, she was a Nihil at heart. So she's bad. She's ruthless. She unfortunately knows what she's doing. And she's a very difficult opponent for Avar to have. Eventually, one of Elzar's failed attempts, which is called a Tythonic Resonator, it was an old gadget that used to be used a really, really long time ago by Jedi, but they don't use it anymore because it's actually kind of dangerous. But the first time he used it, it went horribly wrong, but his droid 4-5 repaired the gadget to where Elzar was able to try again. The droid, of course, did a way better job with it than Elzar did. And so Elzar actually tries to use it again, and pretty much what it's supposed to do is magnify force abilities. So when Elzar is using this device and he reaches out to Avar in the force, she actually does hear it, even though she's like super, super far away because he's using this device. Avar hears it at just the exact moment. She hears it when she's pretty much at her lowest. General Vice is driving her crazy. She feels super alone. She feels like she's not making any progress. And then in that moment, she hears Elzar reach out to her. And when she hears that, she's got like a new energy of, I can do this. Then we have issue 3, which is The Will of the Force. This one opens 5 days after the fall of Starlight Beacon. And we do see that Bel and Elzar are disagreeing about the fate of Buryaga. So we see what Elzar was talking about in issue 2. We see a little bit more of that in this issue. And this is when that short story from Tales of Light and Life would be helpful to have read. It pretty much explains what exactly happens with Bel's efforts to find Buryaga. This comic does mention it, but it does kind of feel like you missed something if you haven't read that short story. But Bel does find Buryaga where he thought he would, and Buryaga's okay, thank God. And so they are going back to Coruscant together. When they get to Coruscant, we also learned that Indira Stokes survived her injuries too, so she's alive as well. We also see Bel being reunited with his dog Ember. Also, thank God. Anytime those two are separated, I am just worrying about it. So I'm very glad that Ember is back with Bel. I don't know how Bel lets his dog just go hang out with other people during wartime. I would not be cool with that. Even if it was like a Jedi who was very trustworthy, I'd be like, there's just too many things that could go wrong. That's just something I can't relate to. We also do see Bel and Buryaga become Jedi Knights too. So that's how when Eye of Darkness opens, it opens with them being Jedi Knights now. And as time is going on, Bel is really obsessed with finding out who Markion is, where Markion is, what his whole deal is. Like, Bel is like, he's going down like a Markion Row Wikipedia rabbit hole type of thing. He's really trying to learn everything he can. And this behavior does remind me a lot of Elzar, because Elzar also becomes very obsessive when it comes to getting information about the Nihil, wanting to do something, wanting to find Avar. Just like the obsessiveness and just the desperation. I feel like Bel and Elzar really have that in common. So unfortunately, I mean, I love those two characters, but I'm wondering if we're going to see that bite them in the butt soon. And Buryaga notices this too. He's worried about Bel. He's like, he does not seem good. It's not really sitting right with Buryaga how Bel is behaving. And eventually Buryaga and Pratri Veeder do come up with a solution for Bel. This is when they're forming the Jedi Republic Task Force. And Lena So has asked them to form this because the Nihil, they're coming out of the occlusion zone and they're raiding the nearby planets. And so they want to have some Republic military stationed outside of the occlusion zone to stop the Nihil from coming out of it and causing problems. It sounds like something that would probably be a good fit for Bel, because right now he's kind of obsessed with wanting to go fight the Nihil. So this is a great opportunity for him to go do that. And when this first starts out, Master Veeder does try to tell Bel, like, we're not there in a martial capacity. Like, we're just being Jedi assisting the Republic. Like, we're not warriors, blah, blah, blah. Okay, we're gonna see how long that's gonna last, because I kind of don't think that that's gonna stick around, especially with just the direction that we see things going and history repeating itself with the prequels and all that. But the original intention is that they're trying to make it to where the Jedi are just there to kind of be like support of the Republic and kind of just be there as a symbol for the people that are getting raided by the Nihil. But I'm sure that the militarization is coming any day now. And what is kind of sad about this is that Buryaga, even though he's happy at the temple working with the younglings, that's kind of his thing. Because he's worried about Bel, he does decide to join the task force with Bel to try to be there to support Bel. So that kind of bummed me out, because, I mean, it's good that Buryaga's supporting his friend, but I know it's not really what Buryaga wants to be doing, so that part was kind of sad. And when the task force is created and they're actually, now they're actually starting to fight the Nihil as part of the task force, this is when we see Master Veeder get kidnapped by the Nihil. So Eye of Darkness does open with Master Veeder being in Nihil custody. I don't know if that's really a spoiler, because that happens like at the very beginning of the book. And we see how exactly he gets captured in this issue. So pretty much what happened is the task force They ran off the Nihil from this planet called Asternon. And Master Vader does go down to the planet with some other soldiers and Jedi. And General Shrike, who she's one of the main Nihil generals that's kind of like in charge of these raids, has access to lightsaber nullifying technology. And pretty much what it does is it just makes it to where the lightsabers don't work how they're supposed to. And because she has that, they are able to kind of get a leg up against the Jedi when the Nihil come back to the planet. But the cool thing is that because the lightsabers aren't working properly, Master Vader has a chance to demonstrate Shonju, which is a type of unarmed force combat, which I think is so cool. It's like, like that scene in Ahsoka where Ezra is fighting without a lightsaber. He's just fighting using the Force. It's like that. And I just think that that's such a cool concept. So I was excited that we saw an example of that in this comic. I would love to see more of that because to me, it makes a lot of sense that even though the lightsaber is a Jedi's main weapon, it makes sense that you don't want it to be your only weapon. And, there might be a time where you can't use your lightsaber. Maybe your lightsaber gets taken away from you. There's a lot that can go wrong. So to me, it makes a lot of sense to have this sort of unarmed force combat. So I thought it was super cool to see an example of that in this issue. But sadly, what happens is that General Shrike is able to shoot him enough to wound him, but not kill him. And that is when they take Master Vader, because of course Markion Ro wants him alive. And so we do find out the fate of Master Vader in Eye of Darkness. So if you haven't read that yet and you want to know what happens to him, that is where you find out. Then we have issue 4, which is Ever Victorious. This issue is a little bit different than the previous 3 because it's written from the perspective of the Nihil. We are starting with 1 week after the fall again, but we're seeing the Nihil. They're just celebrating every day. They're partying. The partying is going on for a long time. It's drawn in such a way to where it looks like it's getting kind of repetitive. They're just partying all day, every day, over and over and over again. And you see Gira Staros, who she is the senator who ended up betraying the Senate in phase 1 and is now dating Markion Ro and supporting him and whatever. So basically she's a traitor. We see her trying to convince Markion that, okay, all this partying is cool and all, but like we've got to do something, like otherwise like the Republic is going to overpower us at some point. This can't go on forever. This isn't sustainable. And Markion just wants to party. He really doesn't care at first. But Gira is trying to push him to be something stronger, to like actually try to create something here instead of just partying all the time. And pretty much what she offers is that she knows how to govern. She knows the ins and outs of creating a government, what exactly you need, all of that stuff. And Markion Ro is like the ruler. So she wants to govern and she wants him to rule. So I thought that was a cool line because I felt like that explained really well, like kind of like what it is that she's trying to get him to be. Maybe he doesn't have to know all of the ins and outs of government and like know all of the technical specifics and all of that, but she does feel like he has leadership qualities if he would just tap into those. We also do see in this issue how exactly General Vice joins the Nihil. The way that it happens is she was actually living on a planet that was raided by the Nihil, and when the Nihil raid it, she actually it kind of just does all of their work for them and hands the planet over to them as sort of an offering to Markion to try to prove to him like, hey, I know what I'm doing and you should have me join you. And it works. Markion is a little suspicious of her at first because he's kind of waiting on her to turn on him, sort of like a what's in it for you type of thing. But she does prove her skill, and she has a reputation as a Jedi hunter. So he kind of can't, I mean, he needs her. So he ends up letting her join. In this issue, we also see Markion meeting with the mad scientist Bulin. And the way that he recruits him, this is a character that we see a couple times in Eye of Darkness, but the way that he recruits him is that he was a mad scientist that was imprisoned in a Republic prison that was taken over by the Nihil. So Markion Ro has access to this guy, and he is recruiting him to help him figure out the Nameless, figure out how to breed them, figure out, what exactly the species needs to thrive and all of that. He's super creepy and seems horrible, so of course he's very willing to help Markion. And then we fast forward to a year after the fall, and Girastaros is now pretty impressed with where Markion has ended up. He's at least kind of got a government started. He's appointed people to help him with different areas of the Nihil government. So it's definitely a start of trying to actually create a sort of system other than just raiding different places over and over and over again. And then that is where this series leaves off. And so Eye of Darkness does take a lot of these little plot lines that this series started and just kind of carries them forward, explains them more, fleshes them out more. We find out the fate of certain characters in that book. We kind of get some more hints of where things could be going. So this series, it definitely felt like a prequel to Eye of Darkness. So that's why, I mean, the two really can't be separated, in my opinion. And I just felt like they fit together very seamlessly. I definitely think it's interesting how the High Republic phase one started with, we had the novels telling one story and then the comics telling another story. And then we had phase two where they were kind of blending a little bit more. And now we have phase three where I feel like they're just totally connected, to where if you're not reading one, you're missing stuff that's going on in the other one. So I think it's cool how the High Republic is really trying to take different types of storytelling media and really combine them and blend them together. So I've really been enjoying how that's been going so far. But let me know your thoughts on this one if you've had a chance to finish the series yet, especially with how it connects with Eye of Darkness. And keep an eye out for future coverage of Shadows of Starlight on the Cantina Cast main show, where Albert and I, we're going to break down the issues in even more detail than I just went into. So if you're really wanting to kind of hear some more in-depth discussion about it, then definitely check out those live shows. Those have been really fun to do. And thanks so much for watching, guys, and I hope that y'all have a great rest of your day. Bye, y'all.